Sometimes, life takes you down a path you never expected, one filled with twists and turns you couldn't possibly have foreseen. What happens when the future you've meticulously planned for years suddenly evaporates, leaving you standing in the ruins of a dream? This is the story of Eleanor Vance, a woman who spent 5 years navigating the emotionally exhausting landscape of infertility, only to receive the final, crushing news that her deepest desire to have a child would never come true. She sat in Dr. Peterson's clinic, the sterile room amplifying the cold finality of the words. "We've exhausted all options. Eleanor, your condition is permanent." The doctor's voice was gentle, but the clinical pronouncement hit like a physical blow. Eleanor had suspected this outcome, but hearing it confirmed turned a persistent, aching hope into undeniable grief. Her mind drifted to the nursery at home, painted a soft yellow 2 years ago, a room waiting for a child who would never arrive. It was filled with the silent artifacts of a life that should have been, a constant, quiet reminder of what she couldn't have. How does a heart even begin to process such a profound loss? The end of a possibility you've clung to for so long. Before we dive deeper into Eleanor's journey, let me tell you, this was just the beginning of a story she never saw coming. The silence in the yellow nursery, heavy with unspoken hopes, was violently interrupted by the shrill ring of the telephone. Eleanor almost didn't answer. Grief had a way of making the outside world feel distant, irrelevant. But years of waiting for news, any news, from doctors had ingrained a habit. You always picked up. "Hello, is this Eleanor Vance?" An unfamiliar voice, calm but with an underlying urgency, was on the other end. It was Unity General Hospital, and the name that followed jolted Eleanor back to sharp, terrifying reality. Claire Evans, her best friend, the free spirit to Eleanor's planner, the dreamer to her pragmatist, inseparable since college, until 3 months ago when Claire had seemed to withdraw after the birth of her daughter, Lily. Eleanor had attributed it to the overwhelming nature of new motherhood, though it had stung when Claire declined her offers to help. Now, Claire was in critical condition. "She's asking for you," the voice said, a strange insistence in their tone. "She's very insistent about seeing you right away." The personal pain of her diagnosis, only moments ago all-consuming, immediately receded, replaced by a cold dread. Eleanor's own needs vanished. Her friend needed her. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The drive to Unity General Hospital was a blur. The hospital corridors seemed endless, a labyrinth leading towards an unimaginable truth. Eleanor's mind raced, replaying conversations, moments shared, trying to reconcile the vibrant, laughing Claire she knew with the urgent call from the hospital. She followed a nurse, her heart pounding, steeling herself for what she might see. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for the sight that greeted her. There, in the intensive care unit, lay Claire. The woman who had been all life and color was now deathly pale, a fragile thread of existence maintained by the beeping and hissing machines surrounding her. "Claire," Eleanor whispered, approaching the bed, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." Claire's eyes, shadowed with pain, fluttered open. A weak smile touched her lips as recognition dawned. "Eleanor, you came?" "Of course, I came," Eleanor said, her voice catching, carefully taking Claire's hand, mindful of the tubes and wires connecting her friend to life support. "What happened?" Claire's voice was barely audible, a raspy whisper. "Drunk driver, hit my side of the car." Relief, sharp and immediate, pierced through Eleanor's fear. "Lily wasn't with me. She's at Susan Miller's, her sitter." Guilt followed instantly, a bitter wave. How could she feel relief when Claire lay here? Broken. "The doctors will fix you up," Eleanor said, forcing a brightness she didn't feel into her tone. "You'll be chasing after Lily in no time." But Claire's grip on her hand tightened with surprising strength, an unexpected urgency in her touch. "Listen to me. I need to tell you something important." A labored breath. "The doctors already told me. Internal bleeding. They can't stop it. Punctured lung, other things." Denial surged in Eleanor. "No," she shook her head. "They can operate." "Eleanor," Claire interrupted, her gaze suddenly intense, pinning Eleanor in place. I don't have much time. I need you to promise me something. A cold dread, heavier than any grief, settled deep in Eleanor's stomach. Anything? Lily. Take care of my Lily. Tears welled in Claire's eyes, spilling onto her temples. Don't let her go into the system. Please, Eleanor. Eleanor froze. What about your parents? She asked, even though she knew the answer. Claire's parents, deeply conservative, had disowned her when she decided to keep the baby as a single mother. No family left who cares, Claire confirmed, a single tear sliding down her temple. Just you. You're the only one I trust. The words hung in the air, a heavy mantle settling upon Eleanor's shoulders. I've always seen how you look at her, how natural you are with her. Claire, I don't know if I can. Eleanor's mind reeled. Walter. What about Walter? They had discussed adoption years ago, but he had been resistant, always wanting to try for their own child, and now, after today's devastating news. But looking at Claire's pleading eyes, shining with desperate hope, Eleanor couldn't say no, not to her dying friend, not to the baby she had held and loved since birth. This wasn't something she could walk away from. It felt inevitable. Like the universe, in its strange, cruel way, was presenting her with an unexpected, heartbreaking answer to her own pain. You've always been meant to be a mother, Eleanor, Claire interrupted, her voice growing fainter. I should have told you before. I named you her guardian in my will months ago. A faint smile touched her lips. The paperwork's in my apartment, top drawer of my desk. The lawyer's card is with it. I promise, Eleanor whispered, squeezing Claire's hand, tears now flowing freely down her own face. I'll take care of Lily. I'll love her like she's my own. Relief softened Claire's features. She is yours now, she murmured, her voice barely a breath. Tell her about me someday. Tell her I loved her more than anything. I will, Eleanor promised, her voice thick with emotion. I'll tell her every day. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the beeping of the machines a mournful soundtrack. Claire spoke again, her voice so faint Eleanor had to lean closer to hear. The blue hippo is her favorite. She won't sleep without it. Eleanor nodded, etching the detail into her memory like sacred text. Blue hippo, got it. And she likes when you sing, You Are My Sunshine, but only the first verse. The rest makes her cry. Claire attempted a smile that twisted into a grimace of pain. I should get the doctor, Eleanor said, alarmed by Claire's increasing pallor. No! Claire held her hand tighter, her grip surprisingly strong. Stay with me, please. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the late afternoon light cast long shadows. I always loved sunsets, she murmured. Seems right, somehow. Eleanor followed her gaze, a chill settling over her as the golden light seemed to reach for Claire, ready to pull her away. She wanted to yank the blind shut, as if she could halt the inevitable. Eleanor, Claire's voice was barely audible now. I'm here. Thank you. Two simple words, weighted with everything left unsaid between them. Eleanor sat with Claire as the sunset faded to dusk, holding her hand as the spaces between her breaths grew longer, until finally, with one last exhale, Claire was gone. Eleanor continued holding her hand long after the doctors came, unable to process that her vibrant friend was now just a body growing cold beneath the hospital sheets. This unexpected call, this desperate promise, had just irrevocably changed the course of her life. Driving home in a daze from Unity General Hospital, Eleanor's mind cycled through practical concerns, a desperate attempt to avoid confronting the enormity of what had just happened. She needed a car seat, diapers, formula. 3-month-olds? Did they need special food? She knew nothing. And Walter, her husband. Walter was in St. Louis on a business trip. This couldn't wait until he returned in 3 days. Pulling into her driveway, she stared at the dark house, a place that suddenly felt alien. She had to call him. She sat at the kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in, and dialed his number, rehearsing what to say. He answered on the 4th ring, the sounds of a restaurant in the background. Hey, you, he said, his voice bright, oblivious. I was just about to call. How did it go with Dr. Peterson? Eleanor took a deep breath, How did she even begin? Walter, she managed, her voice trembling slightly. Something's happened, something big. She told him everything, the final diagnosis, Claire's accident, the promise. The weight of it felt heavier as she spoke it aloud. You agreed to take her baby. Walter's voice had an edge Eleanor had never heard before. It was sharp, disbelieving, without even calling me first. She was dying, Walter, Eleanor said, her voice rising slightly in defense. She made me her child's guardian months ago. What was I supposed to say? You were supposed to say you needed to talk to your husband, he retorted, the restaurant noise fading as his focus narrowed. This isn't like adopting a puppy. Eleanor, this is a lifetime commitment to someone else's child. The words, someone else's child, stung more than Eleanor expected. They were clinical, dismissive, stripping away the inherent value of the life she had just promised to protect. Lily isn't just someone else's child. She's Claire's daughter. She's a baby who needs us, needs you. You mean you, Walter cut in, the coldness in his tone palpable. I never agreed to this. Walter, please, Eleanor pleaded, her voice breaking, the raw grief and shock of the day finally surfacing. I know this is sudden, but when you meet her, we'll talk when I get home. He cut her off, his voice firm, final. I need to process this. I can't do it over the phone, in the middle of a business dinner. The line went dead before Eleanor could respond. She stared at the phone, a deep chill settling over her. She had expected shock, questions, maybe even hesitation, but not this cold, immediate anger and dismissal. He just needs time, she told herself, clutching the phone. He'll understand when he meets Lily. Eleanor spent the night in a whirlwind of frantic preparation, powered by adrenaline and a fierce determination to create a safe space for the baby who was now her responsibility. She ordered a crib for next-day delivery, bought diapers and formula at a 24/7 grocery, and cleaned the guest room that would become Lily's temporary nursery. By dawn, she had created a space that was functional, if not yet beautiful, a stark contrast to the untouched yellow room down the hall. At 9 the next morning, Eleanor arrived at Susan Miller's bungalow, a small, welcoming house with a well-tended garden. Susan, the kind older woman who had been caring for Lily, met her at the door with sad eyes. I heard about Claire last night, she said, leading Eleanor inside. Such a tragedy. That poor baby. Lily lay in a portable crib, tiny legs kicking at the air. When she saw Eleanor, her face broke into a toothless smile that pierced straight through to Eleanor's aching heart. Hi, sweet girl, Eleanor whispered, lifting Lily into her arms. The weight of her, the perfect warmth, felt right in a way Eleanor couldn't explain. It felt like coming home. Susan helped gather Lily's belongings, showing Eleanor how to prepare her formula and explaining her schedule. Claire always said you were the most responsible person she knew, Susan said as they packed the car. She told me once that if anything happened to her, you were the only one she'd trust with Lily. Eleanor swallowed against the lump in her throat. I won't let her down. The drive home was surreal. Every few minutes, Eleanor glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily, secure in her new car seat, staring wide-eyed at the world passing by her window. It's just us now, little one, Eleanor said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. But I promise you'll always know how much your mama loved you. The first day passed in a blur of diapers, bottles, and stolen moments of wonder as Eleanor watched Lily sleep. By evening, she'd settled into a tentative rhythm, Googling baby care between feedings and calling the social worker twice with questions. As Eleanor rocked Lily to sleep that night, singing You Are My Sunshine quietly in the dim room, a strange peace settled over her. For the first time since receiving her diagnosis, the ache of emptiness had disappeared. In its place was something new, a terrifying, exhilarating sense of purpose. Your mama was right, she whispered to the sleeping baby. I think I was meant to be your mother all along. The next 2 days established a new, demanding normal. Eleanor arranged for emergency family leave, contacted Claire's lawyer, and began the formal guardianship process. She even managed to meet with a funeral director to handle Claire's arrangements. Lily nestled against her chest in a baby carrier. By the time Walter's key turned in the lock on the third day, Eleanor had begun to hope. Lily was thriving in her care. Surely Walter would see what she already knew, that this child belonged with them. But one look at his face as he stood in the doorway, staring at Eleanor feeding Lily on the couch, told her everything she needed to know. "So, it's true," he said flatly, his voice devoid of warmth. "You actually brought her home." "Walter," Eleanor began carefully, shifting Lily to her shoulder to burp her. "I know this is sudden, but—" "Sudden?" Walter dropped his suitcase with a thud that made Lily startle, a small whimper escaping her lips. "You made a life-altering decision without me, and you call it sudden. What choice did I have?" Eleanor kept her voice low, rubbing Lily's back soothingly. "Claire was dying. She had no one else." "That's not our problem." Walter's voice rose, and Lily began to whimper in earnest now, sensing the tension. "We've spent years trying to have our own child, and the very day you find out you can't, you decide to bring home someone else's baby." The cruelty of his timing hit Eleanor like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. "I didn't decide anything," she said, struggling to stay calm for Lily's sake. "Claire named me guardian months ago. This was her dying wish." Walter paced the living room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "And what about my wishes? Did those factor into your decision at all? You're acting like I planned this," Eleanor said, her own anger finally surfacing, sharp and hot. "My best friend died 3 days ago. Walter, this baby lost her mother. I'm doing what any decent person would do." "No," Walter said, stopping to point an accusing finger at her. "You're doing what someone desperate for a child would do. You're using this tragedy to get what you've always wanted." Eleanor stared at him, stunned by the sheer unfairness of his accusation. It twisted the selfless act into something ugly and selfish. "That's not true," she protested, her voice trembling. "Isn't it?" Walter laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "For years, I've watched you obsess over having a baby. Every conversation, every decision, everything in our lives has revolved around getting pregnant. Because you wanted a child too. Walter," Eleanor cried, tears stinging her eyes. "We both did. I wanted our child," Walter emphasized, his voice cold and hard. "Not someone else's problem." Lily began to cry in earnest now, responding to the fear and tension filling the room. Eleanor stood, bouncing gently to soothe her, her focus shifting instantly to the baby's needs. "I need to put her down," she said tightly, her voice strained. "We can talk when she's asleep." Walter watched her walk toward the guest room, his expression unreadable. "That's our home office?" he said, a pointed reminder of the life she was dismantling. "Not anymore," Eleanor replied without turning around. An hour later, with Lily finally asleep, Eleanor found Walter sitting at the kitchen table, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as she entered, his eyes red-rimmed, whether from emotion or alcohol. She couldn't tell. "I've been thinking about this situation while I was away," he said, his voice calmer now, but still distant, removed. "Ever since you called, actually." Eleanor sat across from him, a faint flicker of hope igniting. And I think we need to be realistic." He took a sip of his drink, the ice clinking in the silence. "I've been rethinking our marriage since we got your test results." The words hit Eleanor like ice water, stealing her breath. What did that mean Walter wouldn't meet her eyes? "It means I've always been clear about wanting children, my own children, a family that's really mine, a family that's—" Eleanor couldn't finish the sentence, the implication too painful to voice. "You know what I mean?" Walter said, his voice flat. "I'm 36, Eleanor. I still have time to start over, to have the family I've always wanted." Eleanor sat very still, feeling as though she were watching the scene from above, happening to someone else. This couldn't be real. "You're talking about divorce." Walter shrugged, the gesture so casual it felt like another betrayal. "I'm talking about accepting reality. You can't give me children, and now you've taken in someone else's baby without even consulting me." "So this is my fault." Sarah's voice rose, despite her effort to control it. After 7 years of marriage, he was willing to throw everything away because she couldn't get pregnant, and because she refused to abandon an orphaned baby. "Don't make this about morality." Walter said sharply, his eyes flashing. "This is about what we both want in life, and it's becoming very clear that we want different things." Eleanor stood, needing distance from the stranger wearing her husband's face. The Walter she married would never treat a child as unwanted. He would never abandon someone who needed him. "Maybe you never really knew me," Walter replied, finishing his whiskey. "Or maybe losing all those babies changed us both." "Don't you dare," Eleanor whispered, her hands clenching into fists. "Don't you dare use our losses to justify this." Walter stood too, reaching for the bottle to pour another drink. "Look, I didn't come home to fight. I came home to be reasonable. We need to talk about what happens next." "Which is what, exactly? I think you should find somewhere else to stay while we sort out the details." The casual way he delivered this bombshell made Eleanor's knees weak. "My parents have already said you can use their lake house until you find an apartment." He had discussed this with his parents before talking to her. "You discussed this with your parents before talking to me." Eleanor's voice was incredulous. Walter had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I needed advice. They agree this is for the best." "I'm sure they do," Eleanor said bitterly. Evelyn and Frank Vance had always been cold toward her, especially after the years of failed pregnancies. Evelyn had once asked if Eleanor had considered her fertility before marrying her son. "They're coming over tomorrow to help us figure things out," Walter added, not meeting her eyes. He was inviting his parents to help kick her out of her own home. "You invited your parents to help kick me out of my own home." Sarah couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "It's not like that," Walter protested weakly. "They want to support us both during this transition." Eleanor laughed, a hollow, painful sound. "Your mother has wanted me gone since the day we married, Walter, and now she finally gets her wish." A cry from the baby monitor interrupted whatever Walter was about to say. Lily was waking up. Eleanor moved toward the hallway, then paused, turning back to look at him. That child in there just lost her mother. Her entire world changed in an instant, and unlike you, she had no choice in the matter. Eleanor's voice was steady now, the storm inside her settling into a cold, hard resolve. "I made a promise to my dying friend, Walter, and I intend to keep it. If that means losing you, then I guess I never really had you to begin with." As she walked away to comfort Lily, Eleanor felt a strange combination of heartbreak and clarity. The man she'd loved for nearly a decade was choosing to walk away rather than embrace an unexpected blessing. And somehow, despite the pain, she knew with absolute certainty that she was making the right choice. What kind of person turns their back on a child who needs them most? The morning brought no relief from the tension that had settled over the house, only the quiet hum of a new, uncertain beginning. Eleanor had spent most of the night in the makeshift nursery, dozing in a chair beside Lily's crib, unwilling to share a bed with the stranger her husband had become. When Lily woke at 6 azure, hungry and wet, Eleanor changed and fed her with the efficiency she'd developed over the past few days. As she burped the baby afterward, she found herself talking softly, the words a promise whispered into the dawn. "We're going to be okay, you know." She had some savings. They would find a little place of their own. She would figure out work, somehow. They would make this work. Lily responded with a contented gurgle, her tiny hand wrapping around Eleanor's finger. The simple gesture brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "See, you get it," she whispered. "We've got each other now." Eleanor dressed Lily in a yellow onesie with ducks, one of the few baby clothes she'd found among the belongings from Claire's apartment. She was just fastening the last snap when she heard the front door open, followed by voices in the living room. Her in-laws had arrived early, of course. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor lifted Lily to her shoulder and walked out to face them. Evelyn Vance stood in the center of the room, ramrod straight in her tailored pantsuit, while her husband, Frank Vance, hovered near Walter. All three turned as Eleanor entered. "So, this is the child," Evelyn said, her gaze fixed on Lily with something between curiosity and disapproval. "This is Lily," Eleanor corrected instinctively, holding the baby a little closer. "My goddaughter." "Yes. Well," Evelyn smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. "Walter has explained the situation to us." "Has he?" Eleanor looked at her husband, who was studying the floor with great interest. "And what situation is that exactly? Eleanor, please." Walter finally spoke. let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Frank cleared his throat. We understand this is difficult for everyone, but we believe Daniel is making the right decision. Which decision is that? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. The one where he abandons his marriage because I can't have children, or the one where he throws out his wife for honoring a promise to a dying friend? That's not fair, Walter protested. No, Eleanor agreed, her voice steady. None of this is fair. Evelyn stepped forward, her expression softening in what Eleanor recognized as her attempt at sympathy. It never quite reached her eyes. Eleanor, dear, we understand you're emotional right now, but you must see that taking in someone else's child, especially under these circumstances, is a major life decision that both partners should agree on. So your solution is for Walter to divorce me rather than consider giving this baby a chance. Eleanor couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Our solution, Evelyn emphasized, is to help you both move forward in a way that causes the least disruption to everyone's lives. The least disruption, Eleanor repeated flatly. Frank joined the conversation, his businessman's voice taking over. We've prepared a fair financial settlement. The lake house was yours for up to 3 months while you secure new accommodations. Walter will continue to pay the mortgage here for now, and you'll divide your assets according to the prenuptial agreement. Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. You've already drafted divorce terms, preliminary discussions only, Frank assured her, as if this made it better somehow. Lily began to fuss, perhaps sensing Eleanor's distress. As Eleanor gently bounced her, Evelyn watched with a frown. This isn't your child, Eleanor, she said. Her voice lowered as if explaining something to someone very slow. You can't just take someone's baby. I didn't take her, Eleanor replied, struggling to maintain her composure. Her mother legally named me her guardian. There are papers. Papers can be contested, Evelyn said dismissively. Surely there must be some blood relative who has a more legitimate claim. The implication stung. Claire had no family willing to take Lily. And since when was legal guardianship not legitimate? Walter finally stepped in, placing a hand on his mother's arm. Mom, the guardianship isn't the issue here, he said. He turned to Eleanor. The issue is that you made this massive decision without me, and now you're choosing this arrangement over our marriage. I'm choosing this arrangement? Eleanor laughed, incredulously. You're the one giving ultimatums and planning divorces behind my back. What choice did you give me? Walter countered. You brought a baby into our home without my consent. A baby who needed me. Eleanor's voice rose. A baby whose mother died. Walter. What was I supposed to do? Leave her to foster care when I promised Claire I would care for her. That's not my problem, Walter shouted, causing Lily to startle and begin crying in earnest. Eleanor turned away from them, focusing on soothing Lily, using the moment to collect herself. When she turned back, her voice was calm but firm. If caring for an orphan child is not your problem, Walter, then I don't think we have anything else to discuss. Evelyn sighed dramatically. This emotional display isn't helping anyone. Actually, Eleanor said, finding a strength she didn't know she possessed, I think it's clarifying everything perfectly. She looked directly at Walter. If you're asking me to choose between you and Lily, that's not a choice at all. Walter's face hardened. You'll regret this, Eleanor. Playing mother to someone else's kid won't fill the void of not having your own. The cruelty of his words hung in the air. Frank looked uncomfortable, but Evelyn nodded slightly, as if Walter had finally said what she'd been thinking. I think it's time we sorted out your belongings. Evelyn said briskly. Frank and Walter can help carry things to your car. The next hour passed in a surreal blur. Eleanor packed essentials for herself and Lily, clothes, toiletries, the few baby items she'd purchased. Walter and his father carried boxes to her car. Evelyn supervised, occasionally suggesting what Eleanor might need with a condescension that made Eleanor's teeth clench. As Eleanor folded the last of Lily's onesies into a suitcase, Evelyn appeared in the doorway of the nursery. You know, you could still change your mind, she said, her voice softer than before. Walter would reconsider if you returned the child to proper authorities. Eleanor continued packing without looking up. Lily is not an item to be returned, Evelyn, she said, her voice steady. She's a baby who needs love and stability. something I promised her mother I would provide. And what about your promises to my son? Evelyn countered. The vows you took, now. Eleanor did look up. Those vows included, for better or worse. Walter seems to have forgotten that part. Evelyn's expression hardened. You'll regret choosing this child over my son. Eleanor. Eleanor zipped the suitcase closed and stood. No, she said with surprising certainty. I don't think I will. When everything was packed, Eleanor strapped Lily into her car seat and took one last look at the house she'd called home for 5 years. Walter stood on the porch, watching her with a mixture of anger and something else, regret, perhaps, or simple uncertainty. Where will you go? He asked as she prepared to leave. Not to your parents' lake house, Eleanor replied. She'd already called her coworker, Beverly Jenkins, who had immediately offered her spare room until Eleanor could find an apartment. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the rest. Walter nodded stiffly. I am sorry it ended this way. Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him, and realized with startling clarity that she no longer recognized the man she'd married. I'm not sorry, she said quietly. Not about Lily. I'm only sorry I didn't see sooner who you really are. As she drove away, Lily sleeping peacefully in the back seat, Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. But beneath the grief and shock was something unexpected, a small, stubborn flicker of hope. She glanced in the rearview mirror at the tiny person who had upended her life in just 4 days. It's just us now, little one, she whispered. We'll figure it out. Beverly Jenkins' spare bedroom was small but cozy, with just enough space for a portable crib and Eleanor's suitcase. The generosity of her coworker, whom Eleanor had known for only 2 years, stood in stark contrast to the rejection from her husband of 7. It's not much, Beverly apologized, helping Eleanor settle Lily's things. But you can stay as long as you need to. It's perfect, Eleanor assured her, fighting back tears of gratitude. I can't thank you enough. Don't thank me yet. Beverly smiled, adjusting a stuffed rabbit in Lily's crib. Wait until you've been woken up by this little one at 3 That first night in Beverly's home, after Lily finally drifted to sleep, Eleanor sat on the edge of the guest bed and allowed herself to fully process everything that had happened. In the span of a week, she had learned she could never have children, lost her best friend, become a mother to an orphaned baby, and watched her marriage crumble. The enormity of it crashed over her in waves that left her gasping. She reached for her phone, scrolling to Walter's number before stopping herself. What would she even say? Every conversation since Claire's death had only revealed how fundamentally different their values were. Instead, she opened her email and typed a message to her company's HR department, requesting information about extended family leave options. One step at a time, she told herself. Focus on what you can control. The next morning, Eleanor woke to Lily's hungry cries and the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. After feeding and changing the baby, she found Beverly making breakfast, already dressed for work. I made extra, Beverly said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs toward Eleanor. Figured you could use the fuel. You're amazing, Eleanor said sincerely, balancing Lily in one arm while reaching for the food with her free hand. So, what's your plan? Beverly asked, sitting across from her. Eleanor took a bite of eggs, realizing she couldn't remember when she'd last eaten a proper meal. Find an apartment, figure out childcare, go back to work eventually. Beyond that, she shrugged. I haven't had time to think it through. Beverly nodded thoughtfully. My cousin manages a small apartment complex about 10 minutes from here. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable. Want me to call her? Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude. Would you? That would be incredible. Consider it done. Beverly checked her watch and stood. I've got to get to work. Make yourself at home and let me know if you need anything. Once alone, Eleanor spent the morning researching childcare options, calling her bank to separate her finances from Walter's, and talking to a lawyer recommended by Beverly's brother. By afternoon, she had a tentative plan forming and the beginning of a to-do list that felt manageable, if daunting. Progress, Eleanor told Lily as she changed her diaper. We're making progress. Beverly's cousin, Helen Adams, called that evening to offer Eleanor a viewing of a recently vacated one-bedroom apartment. "It's small," she warned, "but the building has good security and there's a nice park across the street." The apartment was indeed small, a compact living room connected to a galley kitchen, a bedroom barely large enough for a double bed, and a bathroom with chipped tiles but a surprisingly good shower. The walls needed paint, the carpet had seen better days, but the windows were large, filling the space with late afternoon sunlight. "It's perfect," Eleanor said, already imagining where Lily's crib would go. "When can I move in?" Helen smiled. "Beverly explained your situation. I can have the paperwork ready tomorrow, and you can move in by the weekend if you want." Eleanor signed the lease the next day, using some of her savings for the security deposit and first month's rent. Beverly helped her shop for essentials, a futon for the living room, a small dining table, basic kitchen supplies. By Saturday, Eleanor and Lily were settled in their new home, sparse as it was, that first night in the apartment, after putting Lily to bed in her new crib, assembled by Beverly's boyfriend. Eleanor stood in the center of the living room, taking inventory. She had left behind most of the furnishings she'd shared with Walter, bringing only personal items and necessities for Lily. The apartment felt empty, but also full of possibility, a blank canvas for the new life they were building. "We're going to make this work," she promised the sleeping baby through the monitor. Somehow, it wasn't the life she planned, but maybe, just maybe, it could be a good one. The weeks that followed established a new, demanding rhythm. Eleanor's days were structured around Lily's schedule, her small apartment gradually filling with baby gear and toys. The divorce from Walter was nearly finalized. The house they'd shared was on the market, her portion of the proceeds providing a modest financial cushion. Walter had moved to St. Louis permanently, maintaining minimal contact through their lawyers. Lily continued to thrive, growing from a baby into a toddler with a distinct personality, stubborn, curious, and surprisingly funny. She learned to walk at 11 months, tottering around the apartment with a reckless confidence that made Eleanor's heart both swell with pride and leap with anxiety. Her first word was book, followed closely by mama, a term that still brought tears to Eleanor's eyes, even as it came with the complicated knowledge that she was Lily's second mother. Eleanor's blog, The Unexpected Mother, which she'd started on impulse the night before returning to work, gained followers, leading to opportunities she hadn't anticipated, speaking at a conference for adoptive parents, contributing to an anthology about alternative paths to motherhood, connecting with other women, navigating similar journeys. "I never planned any of this," she confessed to Margaret Davis on Lily's first birthday, watching as the toddler smeared cake across her face with gleeful abandon. "That's usually how the best stories go," Margaret replied, snapping photos of the messy celebration. "Unplanned, unexpected, and so much better than what you thought you wanted." Looking around at the small gathering, Beverly Jenkins and her boyfriend, Mrs. Lee, colleagues who had become friends, and other mothers from daycare, Eleanor realized they had built something precious from the wreckage of her previous life, a community, a family of choice. Later that night, after the party had ended and Lily was asleep in her crib, now moved to the living room to make space in the bedroom for her growing collection of toys, Eleanor stood at the window, looking out at Elmwood Park across the street. A year ago, she had been devastated by her diagnosis, then broken by Walter's rejection. Now, somehow, she had found a kind of wholeness she hadn't known was possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "You're amazing. You know that what you've built for Lily and yourself this year is nothing short of miraculous. Claire would be so proud." Eleanor smiled, knowing it was true. From the baby monitor came the soft sounds of Lily's steady breathing, the rhythm that had become the heartbeat of Eleanor's new life. "We did it, Claire," she whispered to her absent friend. "1 year down, a lifetime to go." Spring arrived with a burst of color in Elmwood Park across from Eleanor's apartment. Lily, now 15 months old, delighted in the flowers blooming along the walking paths, pointing and babbling enthusiastically during their evening strolls. "Yes, that's a daffodil," Eleanor would explain patiently. "Can you say daffodil? Da-da," Lily would respond, reducing most multi-syllable words to this simpler sound. Life had found a rhythm. Eleanor had been promoted at work and negotiated a flexible schedule that allowed her to work from home 2 days a week. Lily thrived at daycare, making friends and developing new skills daily. The small apartment had become a true home, filled with books, toys, and the evidence of a happy toddler. On a mild Tuesday evening, Eleanor was preparing dinner while Lily played with blocks on the kitchen floor. The doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence, as most of their visitors texted before coming over. "Who could that be?" Eleanor asked Lily playfully. "Shall we go see?" Lily toddled alongside her to the door, clutching Eleanor's pant leg. Through the peephole, Eleanor saw a man in military uniform, perhaps collecting for veterans, she thought, though he seemed too young. She opened the door, keeping Lily partially behind her out of habit. The man was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with closely cropped dark hair and tired eyes. He shifted nervously as the door opened. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked, her voice cautious. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" His voice was deep but hesitant. "Yes," she confirmed, increasingly puzzled. The man's gaze dropped to Lily, who was peering curiously around Eleanor's legs. Something in his expression changed, a flash of emotion Eleanor couldn't identify. "My name is Henry Brooks," he said quietly. "I'm Lily's biological father." Eleanor felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. Her arm instinctively moved to pull Lily closer. "That's not possible," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Claire never... She said Lily's father wasn't in the picture." The man, Henry, nodded slightly. "She wouldn't have known how to reach me. I was deployed when she..." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "May I please come in, just to talk?" Eleanor hesitated. Every protective instinct urged her to close the door, to shield Lily from this stranger claiming to be her father. But something in his expression, a mix of uncertainty and hope, made her pause. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Henry reached into his pocket and produced a folded paper. "I have a copy of Lily's birth certificate. I found it when I was trying to locate Claire after coming home 3 months ago. That's when I learned about her accident." Eleanor took the paper with trembling fingers. There it was, Jacob Allen Lawson listed as the father. No, Henry Brooks. The new name felt foreign, yet undeniably real. She'd never seen Lily's original birth certificate. All her legal documents had come through Claire's lawyer after her death. "Please," Henry said softly. "I just want to talk." Eleanor nodded stiffly, stepping back to allow him in. Lily, sensing the tension, clung to her more tightly. "I'm going to put her in her playpen with a snack," Eleanor said, her voice taut, trying to regain her composure. "Make yourself comfortable in the kitchen." Eleanor's mind raced as she arranged apple slices on Lily's favorite plate. How had Claire never mentioned Lily's father by name? Why had she said he wasn't involved? And what did this man want now? After all this time, what kind of twist was this on the life she thought she finally had a handle on? After settling Lily with her snack, a small, blonde head bent over apple slices and a blue hippo, Eleanor returned to find Henry Brooks standing awkwardly in the living room, still holding his cap in his hands. He looked out of place in the small apartment, a soldier in transit in a life that had just found a fragile peace. "Please, sit," she said, gesturing to the sofa while taking the armchair opposite, maintaining a careful distance. "You said you were deployed." Henry nodded, perching on the edge of the couch, a picture of discomfort. "Afghanistan. I was there when Lily was born." He paused, gathering his thoughts, his gaze occasionally drifting towards the playpen. "Claire and I, we weren't together long, maybe 2 months. Then I got deployment orders, and she ended things." He swallowed hard. "She never told you she was pregnant?" Eleanor asked, her heart still racing with a mix of apprehension and something that felt like morbid curiosity. "Why the secrecy? No." A shadow crossed his face. "I tried to keep in touch, but she stopped responding to my messages. I figured she'd moved on. When I came back 3 months ago, I wanted to at least say hello. See how she was doing." His voice was quiet now, raw with a recent pain that Eleanor recognized. "Instead, I found out she died over a year ago." Eleanor watched him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. He seemed genuine. But she had been wrong about someone else she'd trusted completely. "How did you find me?" "It wasn't easy," Henry admitted. "I went to her old apartment first, but knew people lived there. The neighbor remembered her, told me about the accident, mentioned she had a baby." He ran a hand over his short hair, a gesture of tired frustration. "I couldn't believe it. He'd checked public records, found Lily's birth certificate with his name on it. Then he'd tracked down Claire's lawyer, who had eventually told him about the guardianship arrangement with Eleanor. It was a chain of events that felt both improbable and destined." "What do you want?" Eleanor asked bluntly, cutting through the narrative of his search. Lily wasn't just a name on a paper. She was a person, her person. Henry's eyes darted to the playpen where Lily was happily munching apple slices, seemingly oblivious to the weighty conversation happening just feet away. "I don't know," he said honestly, his gaze softening as he looked at his daughter. "When I found out I had a daughter, that Claire had died, I just needed to see her, to understand." "She's not just a daughter," Eleanor said, an edge creeping into her voice, a fierce protectiveness rising. "She's Lily. She's a person with a life and a routine. And," she broke off, fighting for composure, "I'm in the process of adopting her. I'm the only mother she remembers." Henry held up his hands, a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to disrupt her life, I swear. He looked at Lily again, his expression melting into something akin to wonder. "I just wanted to know her. To see her, at least once." Eleanor felt torn. Sympathy for this man, who had just discovered he had a child he never knew existed, warred with a fierce, almost primal protectiveness for the little girl who had become her whole world. "I need to know your intentions," she said flatly. "Are you planning to seek custody?" Henry looked startled, as if the thought had never occurred to him. "No, God, no, I wouldn't." He shook his head vehemently. "I don't know the first thing about raising a child, and she doesn't know me. That would be cruel." Some of the tension in Eleanor's shoulders eased. That, at least, sounded sincere. "Then what do you want?" Henry considered the question seriously, choosing his words carefully. "Honestly, I'm not sure. When I found out about her, I felt this responsibility. Like I needed to make sure she was okay, at minimum." He met Eleanor's gaze directly, his tired eyes holding hers. "Now that I've found you, I can see that she is more than okay." Lily had finished her snack and was now babbling to herself, playing with the blue hippo. Henry watched her, a soft smile touching his lips. "She looks like my sister," he said softly. "Same eyes." The simple observation, so personal and yet so innocent, broke through some of Eleanor's weariness. It was a connection, however fragile. Would you like to see some pictures?" she offered cautiously. "I have albums." Henry's face lit up, the weariness momentarily receding. "You do? I'd love that. Thank you." Eleanor retrieved her laptop, opening folders of photos organized by month. "These start from when she was 3 months old," she said, a silent acknowledgement of when her life with Lily had begun. Right after, she didn't need to finish the sentence. For the next hour, Eleanor clicked through images of Lily's first year, her first tooth, first steps, first birthday. Henry asked questions, listening intently as Eleanor explained each milestone. His genuine interest was evident, his reactions those of someone seeing something precious for the first time. "You've done an amazing job with her," he said eventually, his voice thick with emotion. "Better than I could have, better than anyone could have expected." "I love her," Eleanor said simply, stating the undeniable truth. "She's my daughter, in every way that matters." Henry nodded. "I can see that." He hesitated, a new question forming in his eyes. "Would it be possible, would you consider letting me meet her properly, not as her father, necessarily, just as someone who cares about her?" The request was reasonable, far more so than Eleanor had feared when he'd first appeared at her door. Still, her protective instincts remained high. She needed to be sure. "I'd need to think about it. This is a lot to process." "Of course," Henry agreed quickly. "Take all the time you need. I'm staying in town for at least a few months. I just started a job at the Lakeside Veterans Hospital. You're a doctor, Eleanor asked, surprised. Henry smiled slightly. Combat medic. Now, I'm working as a physician's assistant in rehabilitation services. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Henry's military service, Eleanor's work, the neighborhood, Lily, losing interest in her toys, began to fuss in her playpen. I should get her dinner started, Eleanor said, rising. I'll get out of your way. Henry stood immediately. Thank you for not slamming the door in my face. I considered it, Eleanor admitted with the ghost of a smile. But I'm glad I didn't. At the door, Henry paused. Can I leave my number, in case you decide? He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Eleanor nodded, handing him her phone to enter his contact information. As he returned it, their fingers brushed briefly. She really is beautiful, Henry said, glancing back at Lily. Just like her mother. Eleanor wasn't sure if he meant Claire or herself, and she didn't ask. I'll be in touch, she promised. After he left, Eleanor leaned against the closed door, her mind whirling. Lily toddled over, raising her arms to be picked up. Mama up. Eleanor lifted her, holding her close, breathing in the familiar scent of baby shampoo and apple juice. Oh, Lily, she whispered. Life is never simple, is it? That night, after Lily was asleep, Eleanor called Margaret Davis. He seemed genuine, she explained after recounting the unexpected visit. Not threatening at all, almost grateful. What are you going to do? Margaret asked. Eleanor sighed. I don't know. Legally, he has rights. He could contest the adoption if he wanted to. But he said he wouldn't, Margaret pointed out. People say a lot of things, Eleanor replied, a bitter echo of Walter's betrayal in her mind. Walter promised to love me forever. Remember? Margaret was quiet for a moment. True, but not everyone is Walter. Eleanor thought about Henry's face as he looked at Lily's photos, the mixture of wonder and regret, the careful way he'd asked to meet her. No, she agreed finally. Not everyone is Walter. How do you measure the risk of opening your life, and Lily's, to another person after you've been hurt so deeply? After 3 days of careful consideration, weighing the risks and the potential rewards, Eleanor texted Henry Brooks. She suggested they meet at Elmwood Park across from her apartment on Saturday morning. Lily was usually at her best early in the day, she explained, wanting to ensure the first meeting was as positive as possible, but she'd like to keep it brief. Henry replied immediately, his response simple and reassuring. Whatever works best for Lily, thank you for this chance. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, mild sunshine, and a gentle breeze. Eleanor dressed Lily in her favorite overalls and packed a bag with snacks, sunscreen, and all the essentials for a morning out. We're going to meet someone special today, she told Lily as she brushed her fine hair, securing a butterfly barrette. He knew your first mommy, Lily. Lily, more interested in the sparkly butterfly than the weighty words, just smiled. Fly, she said, pointing. Yes, butterfly. Eleanor agreed, a soft smile touching her lips. Very pretty. Henry was waiting by the park entrance when they arrived, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt rather than his uniform. He looked younger somehow, less formal, but more nervous. Hi, he said, his gaze immediately finding Lily, who was holding Eleanor's hand and studying him with open curiosity. Thanks for coming. This is Lily, Eleanor said, kneeling beside the toddler. Lily, this is Mr. Henry. Can you say hello? Lily regarded him solemnly for a moment before offering a tiny, tentative wave. Hi. Henry's face lit up. He knelt to her level, keeping a respectful distance, not wanting to overwhelm her. Hi, Lily. I like your butterfly. Lily touched the barrette proudly. Fly. That's right, Henry agreed, glancing at Eleanor with such genuine delight that she felt some of her anxiety ease. There's a good playground this way, she suggested, leading the way. Lily loves the swings. The next hour passed with surprising ease. Henry followed their lead, watching as Lily explored the playground with the determined focus of a toddler discovering the world. He didn't try to force interaction, simply observed, occasionally offering a quiet comment to Eleanor or a gentle smile to Lily. When Lily, in her fearless toddler way, allowed him to push her on the swing, his careful attention to her cues of more and stop impressed Eleanor. It was clear he was paying attention, not just going through the motions. "You're good with her," she observed when Lily was occupied with the sandbox, meticulously filling a small bucket with sand. Henry shrugged slightly. "I have nieces and nephews. Kids are pretty straightforward when you pay attention." "Not all adults understand that," Eleanor replied, thinking of Walter's impatience with children, his discomfort around them. "Military training helps," Henry said with a slight smile. "Observation skills, adapting to changing situations, following the lead of the person who knows the terrain better." Eleanor found herself smiling back. She'd never thought of parenting in tactical terms, but that was surprisingly accurate. He was respecting her leadership, her knowledge of Lily. When Lily began to show signs of fatigue, rubbing her eyes and becoming less adventurous in her play, Eleanor announced it was time to head home for lunch and a nap. "Can I walk you back?" Henry asked. Eleanor hesitated, but only briefly, before nodding. As they walked, Lily between them, holding both their hands and occasionally jumping to be swung forward, Eleanor found herself studying Henry more carefully. His attentiveness to Lily, the respectful way he'd followed Eleanor's lead, the absence of any attempt to assert authority, all of it spoke to a character very different from what she'd feared when he'd first appeared at her door. He seemed kind, and he clearly cared about Lily. At her building, Henry knelt to say goodbye to Lily. "It was very nice to meet you," he said seriously. "Thank you for showing me the swings." Lily, in the direct, uncomplicated way of toddlers, patted his cheek. "Bye-bye," she said softly. Henry's expression as he stood was one Eleanor recognized, the look of someone who had just experienced the particular magic of a child's acceptance. "Thank you," he said to Eleanor, his voice a little thick with emotion. "This meant a lot to me." "It went well," she acknowledged. "Better than I expected." Henry hesitated, a hopeful question in his eyes. "Would it be possible? I mean, would you consider letting me see her again sometime?" Eleanor had been considering this very question throughout the morning. Seeing them together, witnessing Henry's gentle interactions with Lily, had shifted something inside her. "I think that would be okay," she said carefully. "Maybe next weekend. Same time." The relief and joy on Henry's face was unmistakable. "That would be perfect. Thank you." As he turned to leave, Eleanor called after him. "Henry, would you like to see her baby album, the actual printed one, with photos from when she was first born? Claire made it." Henry stopped, visibly moved by the offer. "I would love that," he said, his voice quiet. "More than I can say." "Next time," Eleanor promised. "I'll bring it to the park." After Henry left, Eleanor carried a sleepy Lily upstairs, her mind working through the implications of the morning. She had expected to feel threatened by Henry's presence, to see him as competition for Lily's affection. Instead, she found herself moved by his obvious care for a child he'd just met, his respect for the boundaries she'd set. As she prepared Lily's lunch, she realized something unexpected. For the first time since taking Lily in, she wasn't alone in appreciating how special this little girl was. There was now someone else in the world who cared deeply about Lily's well-being, someone who could share in the wonder of her development. The thought was surprisingly comforting. It wasn't the solitary path she'd been walking. Maybe it didn't have to be. The park meetings became a regular Saturday ritual. Henry would wait by the entrance, his face lighting up when he spotted Lily toddling toward him, her small legs pumping with surprising speed. Each week he came prepared with something small, a pinwheel that spun in the breeze, bubbles that made Lily squeal with delight, a picture book about butterflies after learning of her fascination with them. Eleanor watched these interactions, her initial apprehension slowly giving way to a cautious sense of ease. He wasn't trying to replace her. He was simply connecting. Eleanor brought the baby album Claire had made, as promised, watching as Henry studied each photo with a reverent attention that spoke volumes. His finger traced over an image of Claire holding newborn Lily, his eyes suspiciously bright. "She was beautiful," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I wish I'd known. I wish I could have been there." Eleanor felt a pang of sympathy for the time lost, the moments he would never get back. "What happened between you?" she asked, the question she'd been wondering since his first visit finally escaping her lips. Henry sighed, closing the album carefully as if it were fragile glass. "Nothing dramatic. We met at a bar, hit it off, started dating." He paused, choosing his words. "When I got deployment orders, I asked if we could try to make it work long distance. She said no, that she'd done the military relationship thing before and couldn't do it again." He shrugged. "I respected her decision. I was hurt, but I understood." "She never mentioned you were the father," Eleanor said, the mystery of Claire's silence still lingering. "When she asked me to take Lily, she just said there was no family who could care for her." In her mind, that was probably true, Henry replied. She had no way of knowing I'd want to be involved, and her own family. He trailed off, the unspoken history hanging in the air. "We're terrible to her when she decided to keep the baby," Eleanor finished softly. "She told me about that." They watched as Lily examined a dandelion with intense concentration, completely absorbed in her tiny world. "I want you to know," Henry said after a moment, his voice serious, drawing Eleanor's attention back to him, "that I meant what I said that first day. I'm not here to disrupt Lily's life or challenge the adoption." He met her gaze directly, his eyes earnest. "You're her mother, Eleanor, in every way that matters." Eleanor studied him, searching for any sign of insincerity. Why was he telling her this now, reiterating his intentions when he was clearly building a bond with Lily? "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because I've seen how you are with her these past few weeks," he said simply. "Because I want you to trust that I only want what's best for Lily." He held her gaze, his expression open. "And because I can see you still have doubts about my intentions." Eleanor couldn't deny it. Despite the evidence of Henry's good character, a small, guarded part of her still feared that he might change his mind, might decide to assert his paternal rights. She had been hurt before by someone she trusted implicitly, and the scars were still tender. "I appreciate your honesty," she said finally, "and I'm trying to trust your intentions. It's just, you've been hurt before," Henry finished gently, his understanding a balm on an old wound. "By people who should have been reliable." The simple empathy in his words caught Eleanor off guard. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. "I lost my brother in Afghanistan," Henry said quietly, his gaze distant for a moment. "He had a little boy who never really knew his dad. That experience, it changes how you see family, how you value it." He watched Lily, who was now attempting to catch a butterfly, a look of pure wonder on her face. "I don't want to take her from you, Eleanor. I just want to be part of her life, in whatever way you think is best." In that moment, looking at Henry's open expression and hearing the sincerity in his voice, Eleanor felt the last of her resistance crumble. This man wasn't a threat to their family unit. He could be an addition to it. He wasn't trying to fill a void. He was offering to help build something new. Could she open herself and Lily's life? To this possibility, it felt terrifying. But also, right? "I think Lily would benefit from having you in her life," she said slowly, the words feeling both momentous and natural. "Not just occasional visits, but regularly." Henry's expression brightened, a wave of relief washing over him. "Really? You mean that?" Eleanor nodded. She should know her biological father. "And you clearly care about her." "More than I thought possible," Henry admitted, a soft smile on his face. "Especially given that I've only known about her for a month." "That's how it works with kids," Eleanor said with a smile. "They get under your skin fast." As the weeks passed, Henry's role in Lily's life expanded gradually. The park visits extended to include lunch afterward. Soon, Henry was joining them for dinner once a week, learning Lily's bedtime routine, becoming familiar with her favorite books and toys. Eleanor observed with growing appreciation how natural he was with Lily, patient when she was cranky, enthusiastic about her small discoveries, consistent in the boundaries he helped maintain. He never tried to override Eleanor's parenting decisions, always deferring to her expertise while offering his own observations thoughtfully. He was, in many ways, the partner she'd always envisioned raising a child with, just not the one she had married. "He's not what I expected," Eleanor confessed to Margaret Davis one evening when her friend came over after Lily was asleep. "He's so respectful of both of us." "Sounds dangerous," Margaret teased, sipping her wine. "A good-looking military man who's good with kids and respectful of boundaries. You should definitely keep your guard up." Eleanor rolled her eyes, a genuine laugh escaping her lips. "It's not like that." "Why not?" Margaret challenged playfully. "You've been single for nearly 2 years. He's single, great with Lily, and clearly admires you." "He's Lily's biological father," Eleanor pointed out, trying to inject a note of seriousness. "That complicates things." "Only if you let it," Margaret replied. "From what you've told me, he's made it clear he supports your role as Lily's mother. The three of you could be a family unit without the romantic element. Or," she wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. "Stop it," Eleanor laughed, throwing a pillow at her friend. "I'm not looking for romance." "Maybe not," Margaret conceded, ducking the pillow. "But sometimes it finds you anyway." It was a possibility Eleanor hadn't dared to consider, not after everything, but as she watched Henry interact with Lily, a small, hesitant seed of hope began to sprout in her heart. Could they build something beautiful and new, together? 3 months after Henry Brooks first appeared at Eleanor's door, a new kind of knock came, this time in the form of a call from Eleanor's lawyer. It was news about the adoption petition, which had been quietly moving forward in the background of their lives. "The petition is moving forward," her lawyer explained, her voice calm and professional. "But the court has identified Lily's biological father and will require his formal consent before finalizing." Eleanor's stomach dropped, a familiar wave of apprehension washing over her. Even though she and Henry had built a trusting relationship, the legal reality felt stark and potentially complicated. "Have you had any contact with him?" the lawyer asked. Eleanor explained the situation, how Henry had found them, the gradual building of a relationship with Lily, his stated support for the adoption. "That's actually ideal," the lawyer said, sounding relieved. "If he's willing to give formal consent while maintaining a relationship with Lily, the court will likely view that favorably. It's the best of both worlds for the child." The lawyer's words, meant to be reassuring, highlighted the unusual path their lives had taken. The best of both worlds. It wasn't the world Eleanor had ever imagined for herself, or for Lily, but perhaps it was, in fact, the best one possible given their circumstances. That evening, after Lily was asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling softly in her crib, Eleanor called Henry and asked if he could come over to discuss something important. He arrived promptly at 8, concern evident in his expression. "Is everything okay?" he asked as soon as Eleanor opened the door. "Is Lily all right?" "She's fine," Eleanor assured him, a small smile touching her lips at his immediate concern for Lily. "Sleeping soundly. This is about the adoption." Henry's shoulders relaxed slightly as he followed her to the living room. "What about it?" Eleanor explained the lawyer's call. The court needed his formal consent before they would finalize the adoption. Henry nodded, unsurprised, as if he had expected this all along. "I figured that would be part of the process." You're okay with it?" Eleanor asked, studying his face carefully. "With me legally becoming Lily's mother, she needed to hear it directly, without any ambiguity. Could he truly step aside legally when he was so clearly forming a deep bond with his daughter, Eleanor?" Henry said gently, his gaze steady and earnest. "You are Lily's mother. A legal document just confirms what already exists." He leaned forward slightly, his expression open and sincere. "I will sign whatever you need me to sign. I want what's best for Lily, and that's you." Relief, immense and all-encompassing, washed over Eleanor, followed by a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an affirmation. "Thank you," she whispered, the words thick with emotion. Henry smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "Don't thank me. I should be thanking you, for giving Lily such a loving home, for allowing me into her life when you had every reason to be wary." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the quiet of the apartment punctuated only by the distant sounds of the city and Lily's soft breathing from the next room. It was a silence filled with understanding and a shared connection that had grown stronger than Eleanor could have anticipated. Before the moment passed entirely, Henry spoke again. "There is one thing I'd like to ask, though." Eleanor tensed slightly. Had she spoken too soon? "What's that? Would you be open to me being legally recognized as her father?" He added quickly, seeing the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "Not for custody purposes, just acknowledgement, maybe even visitation rights that we define together." The request was reasonable, more than reasonable, considering he could have contested the adoption entirely and potentially made things incredibly difficult for Eleanor. He wasn't asking for control, but for recognition, for a defined place in Lily's life. Still, Eleanor needed to understand the full scope of his proposal. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked carefully, wanting to ensure they were both on the same page. Henry took a deep breath, laying out his thoughts clearly. "I'd like to be officially recognized as Lily's father, with you as her mother having full physical custody." He explained his vision. "I'd like to find visitation rights, whatever you're comfortable with, and perhaps some input on major decisions like education or medical care, though with you having the final say." He was offering a compromise, a solution that would legally secure Eleanor's position as Lily's primary parent, while still acknowledging his biological connection and his desire to be a consistent presence in her life. It was a solution that clearly put Lily's interests first, giving her the stability of the mother she knew and loved, and the opportunity to know her biological father. "That seems fair," Eleanor said slowly, the weight of the decision settling upon her. It was a path she hadn't considered, but as Henry spoke, it felt increasingly like the right one for Lily. "You are her father? She should grow up knowing that." Henry's relief was visible, a tension draining from his shoulders. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I promise, Eleanor, I'll never give you reason to regret this." As he prepared to leave, a new piece of information, one that solidified the potential for a stable, shared future, emerged. Henry paused at the door. "There's one more thing you should know." Eleanor raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I've been offered a permanent position at the Lakeside Veterans Hospital," he said, a quiet satisfaction in his voice. "I've accepted. I'm staying in town for good." The news settled over Eleanor like a warm blanket. Lily would have her father in her life consistently, not just when his military service allowed. He was committing not just to Lily, but to building a life in this town. "I'm glad," she said honestly. "Lily will benefit from having you around regularly." Henry nodded, his expression softening. "Not just Lily," he said quietly, his gaze meeting hers before he turned to leave. "Good night, Eleanor." As she closed the door behind him, Eleanor leaned against it, considering Margaret's teasing words from weeks earlier. Was there something developing between them beyond their shared love for Lily? Beyond their unusual co-parenting arrangement? The thought was both terrifying and, in a way she hadn't expected, somehow right. One step at a time, she told herself firmly. Let's get the adoption finalized first. But as she checked on Lily one last time before bed, watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine a future where Lily had both a mother and a father who loved her, and perhaps, eventually, each other. The adoption finalization hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in late August, 8 months after Eleanor had first welcomed Lily into her home. It felt like a lifetime, and yet, in some ways, like only yesterday that her world had been turned upside down. The courtroom was small and surprisingly warm, with wooden benches and morning sunlight streaming through tall windows. Eleanor sat beside her lawyer, wearing a new navy blue dress she'd splurged on for the occasion. Henry sat directly behind them, his uniform pressed and perfect, having taken the day off to attend. Margaret Davis and Beverly Jenkins had come too, along with Mrs. Lee and a few colleagues from work, the chosen family that had supported Eleanor and Lily from the beginning. When the judge called their case, Eleanor stood, her heart racing. The proceedings were brief but deeply emotional. The judge reviewed the documentation, noting Henry's formal acknowledgement as biological father and his consent to the adoption while maintaining his paternal rights. "This is an unusual arrangement," the judge commented, looking at Eleanor and Henry, but one that clearly puts the child's interests first. It's refreshing to see co-parents prioritizing stability and cooperation. At the end, the judge smiled, a warm, genuine expression. Eleanor Vance, the court hereby recognizes you as the legal adoptive mother of Lily Grace Brooks. Vance, congratulations to your family. The finality of those words, your family, brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. She turned to where Margaret was holding Lily, reaching for her daughter. It's official, sweet girl, she whispered as she hugged Lily close. You're stuck with me forever now. Henry approached, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Congratulations, Mom, he said warmly, a new easy familiarity in the address. Thank you, Eleanor replied, meaning it completely. Thank you for making this possible. They celebrated with lunch at Eleanor's favorite restaurant, Lily charming everyone by attempting to feed cake to each person at the table. By mid-afternoon, Eleanor was emotionally exhausted, but profoundly content. As she carried a napping Lily into their apartment, their small, cozy home, she murmured, "Home, sweet home, Lilybug, our home, officially and forever." She had just settled on the couch with a much-needed cup of tea when her phone rang. The office number surprised her. She'd taken the day off for the hearing. "Hello, Eleanor. I'm so sorry to bother you on your day off," Carol from reception said, sounding uncomfortable. "But there's someone here asking for you. He's been waiting for almost an hour and refuses to leave a message." "Who is it?" Eleanor asked, a knot forming in her stomach. "He says his name is Walter Vance. He says he's your husband." "Ex-husband," Eleanor corrected automatically, her mind racing. Walter. After nearly 2 years of silence broken only by legal communications. What does he want? He wouldn't say, just that it's important and personal. Carol lowered her voice. "Should I call security?" He's being polite, but very insistent. Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to process this unexpected development. Walter. Now, no, don't call security. Tell him. She paused, considering her options. Tell him I'll meet him at the Daily Grind Cafe across from the office in 30 minutes. After hanging up, Eleanor sat motionless, her tea cooling, forgotten beside her. Walter. Why now? What could he possibly want? She called Margaret, who arrived in record time to watch the still napping Lily. "Want me to come with you?" her friend offered, concern evident in her expression. Eleanor shook her head. "I need to do this alone. Whatever he wants, I need to handle it myself." "Call me if you need backup," Margaret insisted. "I can have Beverly on standby too." The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon crowd when Eleanor arrived. She spotted Walter immediately, still handsome in his tailored suit, his hair shorter than she remembered, his posture conveying the same confidence she'd once found attractive. He stood when he saw her, an uncertain smile forming. "Eleanor, thank you for coming." "What do you want, Walter?" Eleanor asked without preamble, remaining standing. His smile faltered. "Could we sit? Please, I've ordered your favorite." He gestured to a chai latte waiting on the table. Eleanor sat reluctantly, ignoring the drink. "I don't have much time. Lily will be waking up from her nap soon." "Lily," Walter repeated, as if the name itself was a foreign concept. "The baby. She must be, what, almost 2 now?" 18 months, Eleanor corrected, a cool detachment in her voice. Today was her adoption finalization hearing. Actually, something flickered across Walter's face. Regret, perhaps, or simply surprise at the finality of it. "Congratulations," he said after a moment. "I'm happy for you." Eleanor studied him, trying to reconcile this polite stranger with the man who had delivered ultimatums and packed her belongings less than 2 years ago. "Why are you here, Walter?" He took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about how things ended." "Things didn't end, Walter," Eleanor pointed out, her voice steady. "You ended them, when you chose to divorce me rather than accept Lily." Walter had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know I made a terrible mistake." Eleanor blinked, genuinely surprised. "A mistake? I was shocked and hurt when you made such a major decision without consulting me," he explained, trying to justify his actions. "And I had just received the news about your condition. I wasn't thinking clearly. My condition, Eleanor repeated flatly. You mean my infertility, the medical reality that made me unworthy of remaining your wife? Walter winced. That's not fair. Isn't it? Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but firm. You gave me an ultimatum. You wanted your baby. You told me you wanted your own children, real children. Those were your exact words. Walter. I was angry, he protested weakly. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. Eleanor shook her head slowly. No, Walter. I think you meant exactly what you said. You just didn't expect me to choose the baby. Walter shifted uncomfortably, acknowledging the truth of her statement. Maybe you're right. I thought you'd realize what you were giving up and change your mind. He met her gaze directly. I didn't expect you to be strong enough to walk away. The admission hung between them, shockingly honest. So why are you here now? After all this time? Walter sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it gave Eleanor an odd sense of déjà vu. I've been seeing someone. It was getting serious. He paused. But recently, I realized I've been comparing her to you. I can't move on. Eleanor, I've been thinking that maybe we could try again. Eleanor stared at him, momentarily speechless. After everything, the ultimatum, the divorce, her journey building a new life from scratch, he expected her to simply welcome him back. Walter, no, she said firmly, shaking her head. That chapter of our lives is closed. But we had 8 good years together, he pressed, clinging to the past. I made a mistake, I admit that. But people deserve second chances. You're right, Eleanor agreed. They do, and I gave Lily and myself second chances. At a family, I'm not interested in going backward. Walter's expression hardened slightly, the veneer of politeness cracking. Is there someone else that guy at the courthouse today? The soldier, Henry is Lily's biological father, Eleanor explained coolly, refusing to be drawn into his attempt at jealousy. We're co-parenting. Just co-parenting, Walter pressed, searching her face for confirmation. Eleanor stood up, gathering her purse. My personal life is no longer your concern, Walter. She looked at him one last time, feeling nothing but a quiet sense of relief that she was no longer tethered to his expectations. I wish you well, Walter, I really do. But we're done. As she turned to leave, Walter reached for her hand, a last-ditch effort to hold on to something already gone. My parents ask about you. They miss you. The same parents who supported his decision to throw her out for adopting a baby. Please don't contact me again, Eleanor said, gently pulling her hand away. Walking away, Eleanor felt lighter than she had in months. The closure she hadn't realized she needed had finally come. 1 year later, Lily's second birthday party transformed Eleanor's small apartment into a riot of color and sound. Balloons and streamers hung from every possible surface, and a homemade banner proclaimed, "Happy Birthday, Lily," in bright, messy letters. More cake, Lily demanded, her face already smeared with frosting. I think you've had enough sugar for one small human. Eleanor laughed, wiping Lily's cheeks with a napkin. Henry appeared with a gift wrapped in sparkly paper. One more present, princess. Sarah watched as Henry helped Lily unwrap a small stuffed elephant, a companion to the one he'd given her when they first met in the park. She's growing up so fast, Margaret remarked, joining Eleanor by the window. And so are you. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I'm pretty sure I stopped growing decades ago. You know what I mean? Margaret nudged her shoulder. You're different now, stronger. Eleanor's gaze drifted to Henry, who was now giving Lily an elephant ride around the living room, making trumpeting noises that had her giggling uncontrollably. We're taking it slow, Eleanor admitted quietly, a soft smile on her face. After everything with Walter, I needed time, and Henry. He's been patient, understanding. She smiled softly. He says we already have the most important thing in common. As the afternoon light mellowed into evening, guests gradually departed until only Henry remained, helping Eleanor clean up while Lily napped, exhausted from the excitement. Thank you for today, Eleanor said, handing him a stack of plates. Lily had a wonderful time. So did I, Henry replied, his eyes meeting hers. You know, when I first came looking for you and Lily. I never expected this." "This mess," Eleanor joked, gesturing at the party debris. "This family," Henry corrected gently, his voice soft but firm. However unconventional, Eleanor sat down the trash bag she was holding. "Is that what we are?" "A family." Henry stepped closer, his voice even softer. "If you want to be—" The kiss, when it came, felt like both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Later, as Henry said goodnight and promised to return for their planned zoo trip the next day, Eleanor stood in Lily's doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully amid her new birthday treasures. "We did it, Claire," she whispered to her absent friend. "She's safe, she's loved." And somehow, in this unexpected, unconventional, perfectly imperfect life they had built together, so was she. In the quiet apartment, Eleanor finally understood. Families weren't defined by blood or by law, or even by how they were planned. They were defined by choice, by the daily decision to love, to stay, to build something lasting from the broken pieces life sometimes leaves behind. And she had chosen well. This story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we never saw coming, built with love and resilience on the foundation of unexpected circumstances. What does family truly mean to you? It's a question worth pondering as we navigate the beautiful, messy, unplanned journeys of our own lives. Thank you for listening to Eleanor's story. If it resonated with you, perhaps consider subscribing for more stories of unexpected turns and the power of the human heart.